All right, everybody out there in YouTube land, it is I, Matthew Yancic, the founder and head game master at the multinational conglomerate known as Manufactured Myth and Legerdemain. Welcome back to another episode of Roleplayer with a Thousand Faces. So I'm your host, and tonight I am pretty excited to be talking to someone whose work I have followed for quite a while now, at least a few years. So I am talking to Daisy Darling Grant, who is, I mean, she's famous for many things, but I would say that she's probably most famous for her role playing game called GrymmWorld. So it's kind of a dark and whimsical fairy tale setting for the world's most popular role playing game. Or I don't know if it's the world's most loved or most popular. I always get that kind of confused. Maybe it's both. So it was co written by Ryan Servis. So GrymmWorld, it takes RPG mechanics to kind of like a new level. And I'm going to get into that with her a little bit later on the show. There's a feature of GrymmWorld which I, as an English teacher, am kind of excited about called the Narrarador. And she bills it as her personal love letter to role playing. So we're going to find out more about that a little bit later. But most other programs, that would be enough. But here on Role Player with a Thousand Faces, we go beyond that because Daisy isn't just the creator of GrymmWorld. She is also an avid producer and a very frequent streamer. And she oversees my competitions channel, WebDM, which I actually have to be honest, I've loved and followed and watched for quite a long time now and steal ideas from all the time, so please don't sue me. So she also offers like regular, and if you watch some of those streams that she'll do with Jim Davis and the fellow known as Pruitt, because I never hear his name mentioned, I just hear him called Pruitt all the time. You'll actually see that she offers really insightful commentary and insight on games and mechanics and narrative and all of that. So, without further ado, because this is not the Matt Yancic show, definitely for sure, and because my mother is impatient when I don't get to the guest quickly, let us welcome Daisy. So, Daisy, thank you so much for coming on the program and being here with me today. How's it going over there?
It's going very well, Matt. I'm enjoying myself immensely visiting with you tonight. Had a wonderful day and a really good start to my evening, and this is
Oh,
the best way to progress it.
well, thank you. I'm so glad. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Can I ask? You said you had a great day there. What was so great about it, if you don't mind me asking?
So, my current role at my job at a place which I will not disclose is I'm the vice president of operations, promoted from being a senior creative producer. And essentially, we did a lot of game design sessions. We did what's called an invisible play test, where we were playing the game in our imaginations as if everything worked perfectly,
Hmm.
and then parsed out everything from that conversation into new features, new mechanics, new problems to solve. And today we were able to prioritize in what order we will do what work and make all the magic happen. So
That's
this would be in digital games. So
Oh, that's super cool. Like I've always kind of wondered about that process. I hear people, is it fair to say this is play testing you're talking about, or is this something a little different? Are you
I call it invisible play testing just because we're not actually we don't actually have any game to test yet, and it's all in our imagination. So but it's the same principle where it's like, let's see if we can just play the game as if it was perfect. It's a lot of it's a visualization exercise too.
so are you kind of like saying, all right, well, I've actually what's funny is when I've read books about writing books about writing screenplays. And one of the techniques I've seen, and maybe you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, is to kind of visualize the things that you would like to see in your book or in your movie. And so you sit down and you make a rough list. Is that kind of roughly analog to what you're doing? You're picturing like your
That's
perfect game or
Yeah, and that's kind of what comes out of it. And we might have some probing questions to get details. Like I might ask them, it's like, well, when you click on the start play button, what sound does it make? And they go, well, maybe it sounds like this. And then, the audio engineer can jot down, it's like, well, we need to get the sound
Right.
effect. And then the interaction designer will plan essentially when to play and cue the audio. Similarly, like we might talk about the type of music, and someone might say, well, I want it kind of like the Wii theme music. And then we can then research and say, okay, that's a Latin standard orchestration using a lot of slash chords. These are things I learned watching essay videos on YouTube, by the way. It's why you watch a show like this, so you can learn all these cool terminologies. But like, and then I can put that in notes and then hand it to a composer, and then they'll do their own analysis. And but this sort of stuff, it's almost like a research exercise. It's
Hmm.
like an information spike. We're just going to drive a spike into our imaginary game and pull out all this work that we have to do. And one
Were
of my jobs is prioritizing it.
were you kind of picturing yourself doing this sort of work when you were a kid? So when you were younger, if we like went back to your youth, was this a sort of career you had seen for yourself? Were you doing, were you into gaming as a kid, or is this something relatively new for you?
I've wanted to make games since I was about 4 years old, and I would ask my father. We had an old like Corona PC, large floppy disk you'd stick in, and we'd play games like Dig Dug and Congo Bongo, or more artistic games like Sketch 16, where you can do pixel art with 16 different colors. I think with our original graphics card, we only had 8 or 4. It was something like that, like a CGA.
Hmm.
But I say, well, I want to make my own games. And then he's like, well, you would need to learn how to program. And I was like, can I learn how to program so that I can make games? He's like, well, this is hard, and you're not just going to get a compiler or an interpreted language like QBasic and be able to do this. I still remember to this day, being 4 years old, my dad, and he was a Navy officer, he looks over at my mom and just goes, she thinks she'll just be able to do this. But I still remember how proud he was, like the day I released like my first demo using like the RPG Maker engine for digital games. And he works at a hospital, and he's like, yeah, it's cool. Like 3 orderlies bought your book, because I was like, oh yeah, my kid makes games, and have you heard of GrymmWorld? So it's one of those things. I always wanted to do it. Now my career path has gone in many different directions, and I've worked in a variety of industries, but games are kind of the through line, because they're this like magical experience, this play experience, as I like to call it.
And so what so I guess if you're playing a lot of games, does this kind of mean that well, here's the thing. It's really interesting to me to hear that this is something you've been planning for a long time, or it's something that you've wanted to do since you were a child. I found that just personally for myself, I feel like I went through a lot of different phases and a lot of different things that I kind of wanted to do, and I was sort of exploring a bunch of different things. Um, was so I guess gaming was a heavy part of your childhood, but how about like the reading and writing part of it? Because I mean, obviously you co-wrote GrymmWorld, and you've written a lot of stuff for various publishers and all of that. Was it the writing and creation that you were kind of focusing in on, or was it the gaming experience and the design part, like what you were just describing, you were imagining doing today at work? Um, how about that?
It's interesting, and I'll say this: any method of art that comes forth from me is a result of a generative process where I will experience the world around me, or a piece of art in any form. Could be music, could be eating a well put together cake, and it'll just fill me with ideas, thoughts, emotions. I'll have this response to it, and then I have that part of me that just breaks it down into uh, inspiration to create from, right? So, a great way to break it down is, you're a kid, you watch a movie like Star Wars, so then you get the Star Wars action figures, you start playing with the action figures. Before you know it, you're telling your own unique stories with these
Mm.
characters through the act of play. And then where we think about writing and design, is that's essentially just putting a framework to it and putting some boundaries around it so that it can become a game and gamified. I've always had strong writing skills, and I've had to write a lot of procedures. And oftentimes, RPG books are a blend of a narrative component and a technical component. So having strong technical writing skills combined with experience writing fiction, be it novels or screenplays or other dramatic works. And I think game books are kind of their own unique animal. They're really their own thing. And then that plays into it. But I will say, I think there's many people that have this in them, but kind of the difference is the ability to start and finish a project is a unique skill that is developed over time, and it is something that has to be developed. So I'd say when it comes to writing is a disciplined act, and anyone can maybe start writing. A lot of people might get ideas that never write them down, but you start, the next step is finish. So work to completion. So I would say having the ability to finish projects is a skill that I developed above all other things, which makes any other dimension that I'm working in or capacity that I'm working in possible, being disciplined to finish.
I actually really agree with what you're saying, and this is the teacher me talking because I see a lot of students with a tremendous. I think, to be honest, everybody has a tremendous amount of talent and promise. And one of the links or one of the common failings I often see, if you can call it a failing, is the inability to complete something. And I take it a lot of people I think are not aware of this, but I actually find it interesting that it's something that you would just sort of mention right off the bat. Did you have a problem with this and have to sort of work at it? Do you think did you never have a problem with it and you just sort of recognized it from an early age, or
My challenge at an early age was, I would say, committing to things that I was passionate about. So when you're, you know, I'm one of those individuals that has a solid ability to be good at many different things. Uh, the challenge, though, is essentially taking that and then finding some focus. So if you're, mediocre at everything, that might make you above average overall, where it's just like, oh, you have 5 unique skills, so you could just write and shoot a movie. You could set up the lighting. It's good lighting. Maybe it's not great. You can compose great shots with the camera. You're very great at communicating with actors. You're also decent at performing if you want to get in front of the camera, and you have an ear for music, and then you have good editing chops, but you're not great at anything. So what that would do is it almost acted like a hindrance, because I would say before the rise of new media, and what I'll say is like the advent of YouTube and free distribution platforms, unless you're really, really good at something, most of the world is looking for specialists. So about the only job I could get first in games was, well, the first job I had in games, I was 14. I was an intern at Decipher Games, and I uploaded Star Wars CCG tournament results to their website and formatted them, because I could organize the data and I could write in a markup language. So I was an intern, and I would Photoshop their banner and I would format their tournament results. That was my first job in games. I was the only one with the patience for the tedium to do that. But then as we start to look at other games, it's like, well, you can write dialogue for NPCs, because the playtesting shows that players are having an emotional resonance when they read your NPC dialogue, because you're deepening the relationship with the player and these non-player characters. But then as it started to get to, well, now here's accessible game engines. Here are high resolution video cameras that cost hundreds of dollars instead of tens of thousands of dollars. Here is a global distribution platform with millions of viewers. Now here's one where the video is live in longer than 10 minutes. Well, suddenly, if you're good at many, many, many things, you become a great artist in the eyes of many. Not that I consider myself a great artist or whatever, try to tout myself in that manner.
Mhm.
But that's kind of, I'd say, once the accessibility of distribution hit a point where anyone could have it, that's when I really started to soar, because I didn't have to talk with publishers or
Right.
distributors. Mhm.
It's actually really interesting that you say that, because it's like literally a couple days ago I was watching or reading something on Industrial Light and Magic. That's George Lucas's special effects company
I'm
for
familiar.
Oh, I
Oh, the
wasn't
audience.
I
Sorry.
wasn't actually, yeah, I know. I don't know if you noticed, but
The audience. I know.
Daisy, my mother is watching. She needs to know. But
I
actually,
know.
what's funny though is my mom is totally would know ILM. She would be like, "Yes, Matthew, I know ILM. I've seen the book. Like I bought the hardcover special effects book that they made something like 35 years ago. My dad got it for me for Christmas. But at any rate, I was watching or reading something on ILM the other day, and what they stunned me, and in all my fanboyishness about ILM, I had never known that there was such a thing as the ILM. It's an actual title with a capital G, a generalist, and they call themselves the Gens, the ILM Gens.
Mhm.
And the idea is that the workflow that they produce is far more that they go through is far more efficient than someone that's specialty is just doing, say, lighting, or doing, rigging, or just doing like model making. And they will go through and they'll make an entire sequence, everything, do it all themselves. And it's an actual department at ILM, as the generalist department. So I really like what you said there about the idea of so many people kind of coming into their own, like these people that maybe, like you said, aren't the greatest at maybe sending out a query letter to a publisher to get something published, because they like, oh, I just want to write my stories, or I just want to write my RPG modules, or someone that likes to shoot a scene and it's only 3 minutes long, but nobody ever wants to pick that up to distribute it. Like Fox Studios or whatever is not going to do that. So the idea the idea of being a skilled generalist, in the Renaissance style, that's actually a really good connection there that I had never quite never. I sort of made it, but not exactly in the words that you put it in. So thank you for that. Um, but tell us, what were you doing? So you said that you kind of meandered toward what you're doing now. What were you doing maybe before, or how did the journey toward becoming an RPG professional kind of start?
I think it began with a deep passion for uh, the genre game itself. I've been playing role playing games since I was 10 years old. The first session, I was 10. I had to game master and facilitate Weston Games Star Wars, the role playing game, uh, for a group of surly high school seniors. And I will not say which of my brothers, Sam, made me cry when we came to the first like real mechanic. But I'll say this: the game started great, and we did really good just through the narrative and the pacing and the imagery. And then we got to the first combat check, and I wasn't exactly sure how to do that. So he's like, "Well, go home, read the chapter 5 times, then come back." I'd gotten about 3 times through it when he showed up. He said, "Well," I said, "Well, only 3 times." He goes, "Well, do you understand how the mechanic works?" I was like, "Well, yeah, now I understood it the second time I read it. Just can we play
Yeah.
the game?" He was, well, you should have lied and said you read it 5 times. I was like, "Oh, I'm not a liar." We get into. I've actually told this
I'm an
story at
honest
five
game
conventions,
master.
and I want you. Everyone knows, this older brother was also my mentor through my entire film career. Got me into the game industry. When we might talk about later how I was the head of tabletop for various conventions. He's the one who got me that gig. Definitely, I love him more than anyone. But tough childhood, and but I came back. I brushed off the little tears, 10-year-old tears, and then ran the game, and we finished the first episode, and everyone was like, "Episode 2, when can we play episode 2?"
Mm.
And the wonderful thing is, that's the experience I look for in just about everyone who I game with, where they're 9 years old or they're 90 years old. I tell it kind of going through that is, I worked for Decipher Games. I got certified in Photoshop, and then I had a bunch of different careers before I finally settled in motion pictures and television,
Mm-hmm.
but I was still very passionate about RPGs, and I would often write scripts by making RPG characters, a simple rule set, just playing out different situations, and I would write what happened as a screenplay, and then you'd be like, well, this stinks. The lead character's just been murdered in the first scene because poor roles, but I would write it as good as I could, and they're like, well, if you're going this hard, we love that character in scene one, but if he dies on the first fight, think about what you're
Right.
doing to the audience. So revise, iterate, but I'd play through the scenarios a couple different ways. And then uh somewhere around 2015, 2016 or so, I was invited to run games at an esports convention. This is just before the major boom that we've are still living through today. And there were internet personalities that came to play with me. They had a lot of fun. They asked if I'd play on their shows. They asked if I would do my own show.
Wow.
And the show that I did is I would do what's called D&D Open Mic Night.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 3-part show that would happen each week. Night one, I would design a game for the audience. Just, we're going to design an adventure. Here's how we put together an adventure. Here's how you put together a map. Here's how you do this. The next night, we'd poll random people, either from Twitter, Discords, YouTube comments, Twitch chat, and they're going to play an adventure that no one's ever played before, the one that we designed the night before. Then the next night, we'd run it, and then we'd see how it goes. And then the next night, I would do a second design session and revise my adventure based on the playtest. I did that up until I was invited to start to do what's known as the genre of actual play, which is essentially just playing a game. There are some variances that we'll talk about later, but I always gave like a bibliography and shout outs to whatever publishers whose materials had inspired the game, or an encounter I integrated. And eventually those publishers got in contact with me. They would offer me freelance gigs. And we formed really good relationships over the years, which turned into everything we see today. That's sort of the fast forwarding through 30 or so years of life.
Well, interview over. Thank you all for coming this week. I'll see you all later. I'm just kidding. So then tell me, if it gets serious enough where, or I take it you're taking it serious enough where somebody discovers you just at some gaming convention and says, "Oh my goodness, would you like to go and run this for us?" Um, what sort of role did role-playing games fulfill for you up until that point then? Like before that going pro kind of moment, were you, I mean, I guess you were in it to someday work in the industry, or
No,
what's the, no.
um, I and I think Mare Metal Bard's in chat, and she knows
Yes.
this about me. I believe in doing everything that I do to the very best ability that I have, and I want to reach my maximum level of performance and give my own personal best in any activity that I'm doing, be it playing a game, be it, and I'm also ultra competitive with myself. And I don't want to necessarily be better than other people. I want to reach my maximum level of performance. So when I run games, I want everyone at the table to enjoy it. When I play games, I want to get the most enjoyment out of it that I can, as well as I want every other person at the table to want to play with me again. And then if it's a solo game or an individual game, I want to do my personal best and see marked improvement. Now, life is finite, and we eventually will pass on, and we don't have the opportunity to master or become great at every skill. And role playing suited the skills that I was best suited for. So there's sort of this generative storytelling process. There's a level of improv. There's an analytical component, a performative component. There is a social component in being close at a table. There's a lot going on specifically with tabletop role-playing games. And I also feel that it gave me an outlet to sort of pay tribute to either intellectual properties that I was interested in, or create my own poetic spaces, we'll call them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I saw a cartoon, it was really cool, but you know what? I bet I could come up with a cooler world than that. And that's
Right.
kind of what would happen sometimes. I'd see like a cheesy toy line as a kid, and I'd be like, it's almost there. Maybe if they made this one change, it would be more interesting to me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
That's
that's why game specific.
so then what do you think then? Um, is it safe to say you're a GM? You're a GM more than you are a player, or are you a generalist in the role-playing space where you're like, okay, I can be a
I
player, I
describe
can be.
myself as a playmaker. So if I'm being asked to facilitate the game, I'm going to make play.
Mm,
And whether I'm viewed as a facilitator, a game master, a dungeon master, any of the titles, you know, storyteller, whatever they call it,
mhm.
um, or I'm a player or a participant, um, following the rules of play. I'm a playmaker, and my goal is always I want us to be able to persist through the game, and I want to create play across the table. So um, when I started playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons or even Cypher System, you know, there's a lot of great game masters and facilitators out there, and there's always this kind of like silly subjective discussion: who's
Yeah.
the best. Uh, and I was like, you know, I kind of want to take it from the other perspective. I want to be the person everyone wants to play with,
Mm-hmm.
or I want to be the person who, when they find out I'm playing at the table, people get excited and they're like,
Right.
"Oh, this will be fun tonight." And it could happen from either side of the screen. I kind of like. I'll say this: I don't think I'm any more one thing, but if I had my preference,
Mm.
I would always be a player, because what I've been told by most people that play with me, they cannot prepare for it. There's no amount of prep. I always do something unexpected. Um, but I always highlight the game itself and every other person at the table. So that's giving myself my own pat on the back, but that's the way it's been described to me. They're like, every other person felt spotlighted
Well,
and put over.
I'm kind of interested in pursuing this a bit because I am of the mind, and here's the thing. So I'm a teacher, and I've had to sit through other classes. So sometimes, obviously, to get training, or sometimes, just for fun. I love to learn. I will go and take a class, and I'll sort of discover halfway through the class that maybe the teacher is new, not quite doing things right, in my opinion, or having some trouble in one way or another. And I feel like even as a teacher, I try my best to be a good example student and to help make the table, help make the classroom a better environment, even as, say, a student. Is there something, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, and if you don't have a brilliant answer or whatever, I'm totally fine with it, but it's something I've always wondered. Do you feel there's things that players can do to help the game master shine as a game master, or do their job in a better fashion, or what would
A
you
hundred
say?
percent, 100%. You know, I'll give a little quote. So I went to a thespian conference when I was like 16, and it was an awful performance. Uh, but I still remember Dr. Godfrey, who was our theater coach and professor at the time. Uh, she just said, "Your job as a professional is to learn how to be a class audience." She was like, "They know they're struggling up there. You be a class audience, be the best audience you can be. That's your role tonight." Um, and I think too, like when I'm running a game, if I'm running a newer game, someone there has more experience to me, I ask them to act as the rules adjudicator, even more so than me. I said, you know, there's going to be times where I don't exactly know the right call to make. I'm going to ask you for advice.
Mm,
I'll still make the call, but I want you to advocate for
mm,
the game itself, because I
mm,
might be missing something and you have more experience and I need your help. It might be when I'm playing a game, someone's really nervous. Like uh, May the 4th marks the 4th-year anniversary of a stream we did called Life on Mard, where everyone was terrified beforehand. Matt Mercer let me know he was nervous. He was in the game and he goes, "I haven't played this game before, and the rule book's 300 pages. This is tough, tough, tough." But I just knew when we started the broadcast, not to mention, you know, there's hundreds of people watching.
yeah.
Um, I started with the freestyle rap and made myself look like the biggest idiot and a goof, and everyone was laughing, and people, it calmed everyone down.
Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
calm everyone down. It's like let everyone know it's like this is play. This is fun. It's okay if we're nervous. It's okay to have those things. So I think going back, like as a player, you can definitely help uh, new game masters and facilitators. And I think one of the ways you can do it too is be appreciative of their unique perspective on the game and what
Mm-hmm.
their voice lends to it. Like one of my favorite game masters of all time was my local game master, Brian Ross. You know, Brian's in his 50s now, retired Marine. His master's was in the classics. His undergrad was in physics. Brilliant trained sword master, historical reenactor. He's the guy who's making leather armor, taking a crossbow, shooting bolts into it in his backyard and measuring and then modifying the damage that the weapon does in the game when you're at his table. And he does that exercise every week. Love Brian, but he has a very unique, very like simulation approach to role play that I thought was wonderful, unique, and completely different than the way I run games. And I learned, that style of running a game and really enjoyed it and embraced it. Mine, it's very, it's like a week to week pro wrestling storyline almost. So larger than life characters, over the top. Don't try this at home. Not safe for TV. I like taking that approach. And so, we all have our unique approach to it. And I think as a player, whether they're new or they're experienced, you can just appreciate what new they're bringing to that role. Every human's unique. Like we could probably categorize them, put them in types, but every human's unique. And there'll be these subtle differences that are like, that's the beauty of the game, you know?
I feel like those are the words of a playmaker for sure. So you've mentioned that you see yourself as a playmaker and you're there so you're hoping that people have a good time, they enjoy themselves. But as a player or as a game master, what makes an enjoyable session for you, Daisy? Like what um you come away smiling from what type of a game? What happened in the game or what did you do or what did someone else do or what happened?
I think if I'm a player, I always have this, if it's a new game, I want to touch every part of the character sheet. If I don't, why is it on there? Right? It's like, that's actually a good design exercise too. It's like, do you have all this stuff no one ever interacts or interfaces with? Maybe you need it, maybe you don't. Like, let's talk about it. I also like for me personally, I like it when everyone ends up laughing unexpectedly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like that joy. I also like what I'd call, and what makes a great session is sort of uh, an emergent play style utilizing the game that shifts the meta of the table. Meaning it's like, well, we never saw that spell combination before. We never saw this interaction of the rules. You know what? I've had experienced dungeon masters say, I had to sit on what happened all week.
Oh,
And we're just going to have to decide as a group what the rule call is, because this is like a deliciously complicated mess that you made trying to win a role-playing game. They go, but it's fascinating that your brain worked that way to come up with this scenario to thwart my schemes. And I'll say it was a scheme just because they had planned an interaction to occur in the game, but didn't account for some obscure trick that I had up my sleeve. If you ever read the comics Knights of the Dinner Table, this that kind of thing where it's like, all right, we're going to have to make some phone calls, we're going to have to hold some meetings to talk about the role-playing game as if it's a world issue. And I love that stuff. Love making everyone laugh and discovering new ways to play the game, and touching every part of the character sheet, option or feature available for whatever the avatar is in the game. Then I think when I'm running the game, I think for me, the ideal, we'll call it the beautiful session. There's this idea of the beautiful victory in combat sports, winning, but winning in this ideal, glorious, and beautiful fashion. Not just getting by, not just getting through, or you win on a technicality, but it was the most beautiful execution of play. And I think for me, it's not just prep for the session, but prep for the type of person I want to be shines through the play. Respectful, courteous, kind. Even though I'm portraying different people, I never want the table to see me as a puppet or a puppeteer. It's okay if they know it's me and we're running games, and there's kind of a delicious blur between the performance and the person, where there's a human authenticity that is not lost through the it's just not lost through the act of play. And there can be a wink and a nod, but we accept it as it's real. And that's another, like I mentioned, for me, it's kind of like a week to week pro wrestling thing. There's this concept of kayfabe, where we take something that's fake, but we'll accept it as reality. We're going to accept that maybe I'm not, the villain that I'm portraying in the thing. For a moment, it'll be real. And I think the success and ideal thing is we're able to persist through the game until the loop stops completely. There's this concept of game loops in game design, and eventually the loop must stop. The flow state can't go forever. In old games like Pac-Man, there was a kill screen at the end because the core memory of the game would run out. It couldn't render the graphics anymore. Score went too high. So for me, the ideal is we will persist play until the loop cannot continue anymore. It could be a single session one shot, or it could be a many years long campaign, or it's like, we did it. We finished the loop and we got to the end and we are satisfied. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think there might be some good stuff there.
I think there's a lot of good stuff there, and I appreciate it. Like I like that idea of, I've never, you called it kayfabe, and
Kayfabe, yeah.
and then you also said there was a loop in which you had to sort of complete the circle and complete. I sort of feel I know what you're talking about, because at least in some respects I think I can understand that. There was a certain point where I feel like GMing for me and playing for me kind of clicked. There's a point where I just didn't feel like I could. There's sort of this moment where I was sort of floating at a certain point, and I realized, oh my gosh, I am these characters for these moments. Or did I really give? Was the session a complete, and did it come full circle? Did everything go the way that I thought? And if it went a different way, did it come out better than I thought, or did it come out like in a way that completed the story, whether it be one session or many? So let me just sort of shift gears here a little bit and get to actually something you'd kind of mentioned before. And you said that you were running conventions,
Mm-hmm.
and you had someone that allowed you to do this, or you inherited the position, or
I was the first. So as tabletop role-playing games started to reemerge as a attraction, you'll notice like there's these penny arcade expos, and eventually Dungeons and Dragons and organized play started to be integrated, etc. It was similar across other digital game events to begin to include or discuss the potential of a tabletop section. I started writing and running my own content at smaller shows. They were really war game conventions, and I would campaign for a table to run a tabletop role-playing game. And then as far as being at the more executive and organizer level, an esports convention asked a comic book artist, do you know anyone who runs Dungeons and Dragons? Daisy Darling Grant does. Oh, really? Well, let's would she be interested in doing something? And I had gone through a string of what I'd call bad shows. They were, if it was stand-up comedy, it's a bringer show. You bring your friends and they clap and cheer and laugh for you. So you
feel
so
like
these were bringer conventions.
Yeah.
And so I would bring groups because the conventions would talk, and they would like, well, we don't want to do tabletop RPGs anymore because it does draw a crowd. We take up a lot of space with the PFS or Pathfinder Society or someone else, and they go, we don't have a large audience, So I just did anyone could walk up and play, and I'd run the Impregnable Fortress of Dib by Kobold Press, hashtag not sponsored, which is a level 1 adventure that you can run in about 90 minutes. And then and I just had open sign up on demand, come up, table fills, I run it. I ran Dungeons and Dragons for 162 people that week, and just table would fill and we'd run, table would fill and we'd run. I had paid for 6 3-day passes for my brother and their friends. I was calling people 200 miles away to drive up. They could stay at my house. They weren't required, and so they got a
You
free
are a
esports.
playmaker, by the way. You're a social. You're what does Malcolm Gladwell call? You're a connector.
Yes,
You're a
that's probably the
connector.
best way to describe me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those things where yeah, I just got everyone to come out, and then the next year they were like, well, that was so successful, how would you expand it? And so I expanded it to Adventures League, and then I expanded it to Twitch streamers on demand, where we had maybe 6 local Twitch channels, and they each got their own curated booth, and it was on
Oh,
demand. You could
cool.
choose which channel you wanted to play with, be it Legends of Evantris or Laugh Love Lindy's channel, or the now defunct Castle Mac, and Tales from the Grim, Encounter Roleplay, which is now I think Weave the Tale. Sorry, I had to remember they did the rebranding a few years back, but yeah, it was essentially get out, and then it's just, and then every group is different. Some had, and they would run the game their style. So some had giant, extravagant props and sets. There was another one where it was, very tightly. It was like bombastic performance with 2 dungeon masters, and they were loud and hilarious. And then there was like Lindy. Lindy was just sitting there, and most people who haven't met Lindy, she's barely 5 feet tall, and she's little, like tiny. And 8 grognards come up with long beards and their flannels, and we want to play Dungeons and Dragons. And Lindy goes, what level? And they go, 20. She goes, sit down, make your characters. And like, she ran off the top of her head a brilliant level 20 adventure. And those old guys with their gray beards came out, they said, that's one of the best sessions I ever had, man. She's bad to the bone. And like, then there's me. I ran an ASL table. If you needed an ASL interpreter to play Dungeons and Dragons, I had them, and we would play D&D in sign language. And
that's amazing.
So, yeah, and that's something
fantastic.
I really did. Yeah, that's the that's what I wanted to integrate, where it's like, let's be more inclusive and provide accessibility and interpreters. And because we had some deaf esports players who were really excited to play, and so they came out, and we had our own table so that we could run for them. And then every now and then too, people would come up. There's a lot of talk of D&D, and someone would be like, well, I play masks. And I go, oh, you mean this? And I pull the book out of my messenger back there. Can we play that? I'm like, sure, let's set up a table over here and play.
Yeah,
it was great.
I feel like you really are a connector, and I think that that's probably one of the qualities, not necessary, but helpful in being a game master. Because I think that people can kind of, they may feel that they have a certain set of skills, but I think they can also turn on and fine tune other sets of skills. But I think that that's probably something for sure. I mean, from watching games that you've run, and yes, from watching ones that you've played in as well, I can see that playmaker in you that you mentioned. You had mentioned, so someone had spotted you at, is this how you got into streaming then? Someone had spotted you at a convention, and they just sort of, did they push you out into the...
Oh, they adopted me, and I can say why. So sometimes when you go to these events, the grown-ups have to find the other grown-ups. So the esports scene was much younger at the time. There's a lot of teenagers and 18-year-olds, and then I was one of the only people there above 30. So, there's another Twitch streamer who's actually the host, and she found me, and we became friends. And I hosted a panel for them, and we had unique perspectives on RPGs. And then they were kind of like a steward and friend to some of these younger esports folks, and they watched. They're like, well, we want to learn how to play a role-playing game. And so I showed up at the hotel and taught them how to play an RPG. There's videos of this on YouTube, bootleg, where someone had a phone and filmed.
And this was like, was that your first experience with like getting uploaded to YouTube? Was that the first time?
No, because of Motion Pictures and Television and Film School, I've been on YouTube since it launched.
Oh.
But running a game.
Got it.
adjacently. So I used to do Lord of the Rings living card game unboxing videos and card analyses, and I played a lot of games competitively, and I streamed like old Japanese video games on Twitch, and so I had an idea of how to do it. I knew how to do broadcast, but they said they weren't used to seeing such instructional fluidity, because having worked with a lot of instructional design and
Yeah.
doing scientific media,
Yeah.
I'm confident to teach, particularly games. And I believe in making games accessible. And there's degrees and levels to it. So I was like, yeah, I can totally get them up and running this game. Not to mention, I've just run it for like 162 people at the convention, and
Right.
we
Right.
got this down.
Has doing all of I had no idea that I knew you'd been streaming for a while. To be honest, I'm not the sort of person that I don't really watch a lot of like video game streaming and things like that. But I actually, what's funny is like the teacher in me kind of respects the different ways of creating some form of interactive, like in a way, interactive entertainment or whatever. I appreciate all of that. But let me ask you then. So what was for you when you started doing the streaming and you started like showing up on the screen and you're sort of there for yourself and you're running actual plays? It was, did that did you did you learn anything about running the game itself from going through the process of streaming and running games to stream? If that
It's a
makes sense.
different play space. So I talk about, there's these different play spaces. There's the private space, which might be a home game.
Hmm.
Not anyone can come in off the street. It's gated access, because these are our homes. And likewise, there might be what I refer to as non-performative public play. You're playing at a game store, or you're playing at a convention. It's public space. People can walk by, they can see you. However, the feel and the tone is different when there's 60 tables all filled with people playing tabletop role-playing games than just 5 people in an intimate room. Um, I ran Dungeons and Dragons on stage at comic conventions. This is like old. This is like 2014. I do a show called Puppets and Paladins, where we'd have a bunch of puppets and they were the monsters, and then comic artists would come out and we'd have giant dice and stuff like that. But we'd also do then once we got into the performative public streaming, which I would consider either those stage shows or the Twitch broadcasts, the play space becomes unique, because an audience is showing up, and audiences tend to show up for live streams for 2 things. They want to be entertained and they want to see skill. Though that's why they're watching a game being broadcasted. It people too, like, it's why I watch, like say professional basketball, because entertaining and there is a high level of skill. Same with esports, and it applies to RPGs. I know a lot of people be like, well, there's this other aspect, maybe, but we can push back on some of that. Like it's you'll have people that have rules mastery and system mastery. They also sometimes might introduce mechanics or game objects that are verboten in a home game. It's like the deck of many things that would wreck your campaign, but it's like, one
Right.
night only, out come the cards. All right. Like, I ran a pretty successful campaign where we were pulling out all the stops. Like, I wanted people to have the Tome of Vile Darkness, and I wanted them to have the Hammer of Thunderbolts equipped with everything and have these legendary combos. But also, I let them know, I made the decision early on, like for Dungeons and Dragons, every combat's a deadly encounter. They were like, why? I said, there's an audience. I'm not gonna. It's tedious. Just
Right.
swing and miss, swing and miss. I
Right.
designed new mechanics. Some of them are in GrymmWorld, because like we don't have time to get through anything if we have these slow, tedious combats. So I was like, we're gonna have to crank up the intensity, and this is gonna be, kill or be killed. And it's like, well, what about this? And I was just like, well, that's where my style became the pro wrestling. Don't try this at home. Too hot for TV. For a while, they called me the world's most dangerous dungeon master, but not a killer game master, just a very challenging one. Because I was like, this needs to be high drama if we want there to be a resonance. Like, and there's the other skills too. Just I did Steve Martin's master class in performance, so I wanted to learn how to perform for the crowd. And then I studied like interviews with Norm Macdonald, where he talked about the role of a performer from a stage context, depending what you are. So I patterned a lot of my mannerisms after Conan O'Brien and David Letterman, and just these talk show hosts, but trying to adapt it to the play space. And that was a whole other side of it too, where there's a theory that I saw pitched a week or two ago that I kind of agree with, that actual play is a LARP, not the game itself. They're like, oh yeah, I'll wear this costume like my character. I was like, you yourself are performing a character in the stream that is a public persona that may or may not be you. And like I talked about with people who know me really well, they're like, oh, you're 100% a media personality who's very different than the shy academic girl who, is trying to date everyone in the DC area. They're like, that playing a character in these show week to week. And you'll see, like, I've done analyses of my friend Greg. You'll notice Greg played in a game every Tuesday for 2 years and wore the same outfit on every broadcast. Same little ball cap, same little shirt. That Greg didn't wear that during the day. He put it on for the show because he wanted this consistent outfit every week, same spot, but he was on like 10 shows a week, and you'll notice every show he had a different standard outfit, which kind of became his costume or uniform for the performance. And he would very deliberately and intentionally pick them for that channel and that audience.
Right. So there's obviously it's a performative thing. Let me ask you something that you may or may not, I don't know if you're going to reveal this or not. Do you prefer playing your own private games with when the camera's off, or do you prefer playing a game when everybody's watching? What, you don't have to give an answer.
Well, let me think through, and I'll say what I like about both. Like when I was the essentially referee or head game master for RPG sports, it was cool to have 8,000 people watching pure mechanical PvP Dungeons and Dragons, way bigger audience than anything story driven or narrative. I was like, there's an audience for people that love the pure crunch and snap.
Right.
And there's an additional narrative because of the way games work, where people are following the story of the team's performances.
Right.
And there's that whole other real world dynamic that was very powerful. Likewise, I loved running the Dracula dossier. Like that was one of the most powerful storytelling experiences. With that said, behind closed doors, and there's this concept in combat athletics about gym fighters versus ring fighters. There's the most dangerous person in the gym. When I'm in a private game, I feel I'm the best player in the world. Not that you can really calculate that, but it's just spiffy, snappier, psychological safety at the table. There may or may not be a historical record. Like they've compared my external hard drive to the musician Prince's vault. I have over 900 non-publicized recordings of podcasts we will never release. They're fine. We can put them out there. Like they're clean. They're great performances with names that would shock you that I won't say, just like these people that have agreed to play and they consented to be recorded. And they asked me, they go, so when are you going to release that show? I was like, that's not a show. They're like, why? I said, one day I'll be long gone, but there will be this record of hundreds of sessions we played together that are just larger than life. Or maybe one day I turn them into something, but I was just like, it's that need to create. So I'd say this private game, there's just pure freedom, like freedom of expression. You could still have that in the public, but then you have to deal with the participatory nature of the public, the commentary, the right to critique. Everyone has their opinion, but you know what? Not all things are for all people, and not everyone has earned the right to all access of all forms of play, that private form of play. Yeah. Michael Jordan said the greatest game of basketball he ever played was the unrecorded scrimmage game for the Dream Team, East versus West, and they just went at it. No refs, called their own fouls, and just went at it. So that's the last thing I'll say on that. So
I like that kind of down and dirty. I sort of feel the same. Like my channel kind of had a little bit of a lull for the last 2 or 3 months because I was moving. But there was another reason kind of for that, and it's that I had gotten to the point where I'd been streaming games, um, and I sort of felt like I missed the sort of random like schoolyard recess yard kind of like fun of a game just between my friends and I with like no holds barred, and we just did kind of whatever we wanted and our imaginations flew. And like you, it's funny, I record them, and I will. What I found is that they're really helpful for me because sometimes our games are rather sporadic, and it might be 2 or 3 weeks, or sometimes in the case of right now, a month before we play again, and I need to refresh my memory. Do you ever go back to those recordings? Do you watch yourself and think, oh my goodness, I can't believe I did that, or oh my goodness, I'm good, or I got to steal that little bit from somebody that did this? Do you
I
critique?
did early on, but it got to the point where um, I think I learned everything I needed to learn about myself to where I became aware of many things, as well as I gained kind of I put it this way. Uh, I think a good way to learn chess is to solve chess puzzles. Then suddenly you learn chess really well. Then you start to be able to do calculation. Suddenly you can see many moves ahead.
Hmm.
Um, or playing poker, a game, it's like the cards don't even matter in some games, right? It's like if you're playing with people at different levels, that's not to say I'm necessarily, I mean, I think there are levels to skill and mastery, and that's okay. It gets to the point where I'm here to play games and I'm going to play a lot of games. I think I have the fundamentals down, and as long as I'm passionate about the process and the form of play, um, I'm only going to get better and better and better without maybe doing the deep analyses. But sometimes it's mission critical. Like with the Dracula dossier, I did have to watch every episode, have a private Discord, look at notes, because that's how you play on the game. Um, but I will say this: every now and then I'll throw up recordings, not necessarily of myself, or I'll just watch people on Twitch and see if I can pick up anything new. Like there's so many players, and there might be a shift in the meta, so to speak, that will
Hmm.
be helpful to me.
So, how do you then go about preparing for your games in general? And I would imagine there's a little bit of a difference between the private games versus the published games or the stream games. Do you have a particular system, technique? Is it different every game? Is it
I
different
can
with
give
different
one.
players?
It's different system per system. Like a
Hmm.
game like Invisible Sun, the players are going to create their own arcs and tell you what they want to do. You know the setting though, but even while you're playing, you know the setting, so you'll be able to steer them. But they're going to completely shock you. Um, but it's a very low prep game. A game like Dungeons and Dragons, I make a list of who's playing, the actual people, their characters, what level, class, race, backgrounds they have. And then my strong start to the session, I want to start with a bang. And then I do a list of 10 secrets and clues. These are things I can throw out over the course of play. Then I make a list of what I think all the combat encounters are.
Mm.
So I know how to look them up, research, read those sections of the monster manual, etc. Then I make a list of the loot that they can potentially get, like these are cool magic items, and then 3 fantastic locations and what makes them really cool. It's like I want to describe a really cool setting that's evocative, so I'm going to write it down, the 3 cool things about it. Maybe if I can touch all the 5 senses, even cooler if I can tie a mechanic back to the 5 senses. Example, Mike Shea did this in his book Fantastic Layers. It's like you open the Mummy's tune and everyone breathes, and he's like, it smells so bad, everyone just make a constitution saving throw because there's a chance you're just gonna vomit as on entry. And like it's a way to tie mechanics to just that raw smell, so you're touching the game, interacting with it, and your character might have a response
Mm.
just based off that odor, that sense of it. But that's a fantastic location. And then uh yeah, and then essentially maybe some of the outs, or but you'll end up with like really cool evocative things in your secrets and clues. then we just kind of play the game.
Mm.
It takes me, if I'm running a 3-hour session, it takes me 30 minutes to prep that. And all the games that I've done on stream, it's usually about 30 minutes prep. But I've run a lot of games, and so there's also a lot of help to get to that point. Now, a game like Night's Black Agents, they use a thriller spine. And so you're going to hang things on that spine, which are dramatic beats. If you've read the book Hamlet's Hit Points, they talk about creating persistence through play. So a game like Night's Black Agents is designed to be an action movie with an investigative component. And so they're like, these are the types of beats that would happen at different parts of the stories. You could flip them different ways. And then depending where you're at, maybe your NPC, if they're a good guy, maybe they turn out to be a bad guy right here. And you'll be able to choose and assign who's where. I actually think I published all my prep for the series on WebDM Plays. Like, you can watch me prep all the games and talk through. And there was slight additional prep maybe that happened with some of them, but not that much. Yeah, I think it's very game dependent onto how I prep. But I think most importantly, the biggest component, which I mentioned at the beginning, is who am I playing with? Mm. What are they looking for in the game? And then also there might be other outcomes which influence the prep. When I would substitute Game Master the Dark Eye on WebDM Plays, I knew that over 1,000 people in Germany watched the broadcast on demand the very next morning. Just they'd get in and they wanted to see the Dark Eye run. They called it like the Hollywood version. They said, there's Americans. These are American TTRPG people playing our game. Das Schwarzauge, pardon my German. I don't speak it. But they're like, I mean, that's a game with a 40-year history that's way bigger than Dungeons and Dragons in Europe. So it's like, but we're running their game. And I was like, how can I prep my adventure to highlight the campaign setting of Aventuria? How can I highlight the mechanics? Because there are people watching. Are they just going to hand wave the mechanics? I heard people do that on Twitch. And one of the favorite segments they had was when a player cast a spell, then began to say what damage it did. I said, that's a 3-round spell. And he was, pardon? I go, that spell has a timing attribute of 3, which means it will cast on the 3rd round. They had never realized that.
Right. They never been explained to them. What?
And at first they felt bad. They go, so I can't do anything for 2 rounds? I was like, well, let's just see how it goes. 3rd round, spell decimates all the bad guys. If that had happened on the 1st round, it would have been a very short combat. And there was a great cost to that spell, but it let everyone else play the game, do things. It built some tension. And then the wizard dramatically wiped them all out on the 3rd round, saving the day too, and at great cost, where they suffered a lot. So, and then the next session, I was no longer running, and the other game master came back. The player went to cast a spell, and the game master said, all right, what damage it does? And the player said, I got to tell myself, this spell takes 3 rounds before it goes off, and there's this mechanic I learned the last time I played. I'm like, oh, cool, then we'll resolve it in 3 rounds. So I love that side too, where it's like, I want people to learn the game by watching this.
Yeah, I think I'm not speaking to you now, Daisy. I'm speaking to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, you're seeing a GM, DM, storyteller at the top of her game. From what I am hearing, like, I love this idea that I love the idea that, I mean, you're thinking so much about the flavor, the look and feel of the game. You're thinking about the authenticity. You're thinking about what the players are looking for. You're thinking about the way that the mechanics are supposed to maybe, fit in and reconcile themselves with the setting and how they're supposed to work together. I, Ladies and gentlemen, for all you aspiring GMs, DMs, storytellers out there, these are things that you need to be looking for, and I highly recommend that after this interview is over, you click on the links below. You'll be thrown out toward a lot of Daisy's stuff. Maybe not all of it. I'll try and get some more links if I can. Where she dispenses this advice, like throwing tennis balls at bouncing them off of a prison yard wall, just like really really quick. So I think what you've just sort of hit on, Daisy, is like really essential and crucial, and that is, tailoring and catering the look and feel, tailoring and catering for the players. It's sort of wonderful to hear you say these things. They're things I sometimes think about. I often think about, but I don't always sort of get right. But I love that. Um, do you think your style has changed and evolved over time and over the years? Like, is there something maybe about your approach that's not quite the same as it used to be, and you feel you've really improved on or realized or
I would I would say this. I think my style kind of adapts. Like I'll say in public play, my style adapts to the meta of the culture. So there are things that I did maybe 5 years ago that I would not do on stream today. Not because they're necessarily inappropriate, but it wouldn't work with the culture where we're at now. Like when Matt Mercer played with us, we pre-planned his character dying at the end of session 1 to start the campaign with a thrust dagger in the heart. I had an opera singer uh, appear on the screen and
spare no
decimate.
expense?
Yes, yeah. Well, I commissioned music where she sang a song in Italian and Japanese and English, and had a pianist. I spared no expense on that, and and we went all out, and that's because I wanted a very powerful moment for the players. However, now I don't think I necessarily want to surprise them as much or as
Mm.
dramatically. Now, the intensity will still be there, particularly with consent, but I want the players, I trust them enough to be in on the magic trick I'm pulling. So I pull different magic tricks. So instead of having a guest appear nowhere, I mean, I did it in a home game where all the players they were taken to prison. They found out they're going to be executed and they were going to be judged. And
Oh.
all my players were very religious, and I had the leader of their church show up as a character in the game and look them all in the
Oh.
eyes. Oh, it was fun. And I mean, once I made a paper craft town in Storm King's Thunder, the town of Tribor, set the town on fire when the fire giants came, and put it out with an extinguisher. But I mean, have you ever seen players watch? Oh, you must have spent hours on this. You spent a long time on this. Burn it for the sake of the art, right? So it's like,
It's
I
it
won't do that. I don't need to burn a town anymore. I have other ways to hit those emotional notes.
But it's the beauty of an ice sculpture. It's beautiful because it exists for a few fleeting moments and then it is gone.
Yes,
It wouldn't be as beautiful if it were still around today.
it.
Um,
I don't
or
know. The
maybe it
ashes.
would.
Yeah,
All right,
I kind of
sorry.
wish I had that
I
town. I
don't.
spent a
Yeah,
long time on it.
I don't mean to twist
Yeah.
the knife in your heart. Um, so then, obviously, it's so obvious to me at this point how much you love gaming and you love games. You love the streaming. You love. Tell us about your love letter to RPGs. Tell us a little bit about GrymmWorld. I do have a copy of it here. And I'm not, trust me, Daisy's not paying me to do this. And you know, what I'm mostly impressed by is that I feel that you've made, and I guess we can get into it in a minute here, but I feel like you've made, I guess what I would call like the GM section, though I don't know if it's quite a GM section, really relevant and really like fresh and new and different. Can you tell us a little bit about where GrymmWorld came from, and tell us maybe how it was that you came to write it? So I apologize if I'm pronouncing the name
No,
wrong. Ryan Servis is your
Ryan
co-writer,
Servis.
essentially?
That's my buddy. So Ryan
Okay.
helped a lot with the mechanical refinement,
Hmm.
and Ryan for 2 years, I love Ryan to death, like with all my heart. That is like my sibling in RPGs. Ryan has written well over 1 million words for Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, and is a brilliant fencer, a very kind-hearted person, and one of the hardest workers I know. And Ryan's job was to take me and get me into shape to write a book, which was about a 2 year process before we even began writing. Like he would have me write analytical essays on the fundamentals of character creation in Dungeons and Dragons so that I could challenge it with my own ideas. And then every Friday night for 2 years, we would meet on Zoom and debate what I wrote. I would have to write essays every week. And uh, so Ryan and I, so sort of here's where GrymmWorld came from. Um, there had been in some of my earlier actual play experience I had a homebrew campaign setting, but if I'm going to do it, I want to challenge some of my problems with the system because I'll be introducing. It's kind of this idea. There's a great book called Maps of the Mind, and it shows all these different artistic depictions of psychological theories. But the idea of the book is where one of these models and theories fails, a new one emerges. And so you will have the cycle of a really great model that inevitably fails, and then a new one emerges. So I was like, I will introduce my model, which will eventually fail, and then another one will emerge. Particularly, I wanted the game to be a lot about self-expression and discovery, where making characters like making a Muppet in the Jim Henson Creature Workshop. I wanted to add sort of this, to reference Jim Henson again, storyteller component, where, you know, John Hurt, the actor, would tell these evocative stories and would appear in the fiction, and it was very flavorful. And so I adapted some mechanics from a Japanese game. Ryutama was inspired to sort of have this Narrarador character. Portuguese is my second language.
I was wondering about that. Okay, got
A
it.
flexibilidade do rabo da lagartixa. Isso mesmo. So like I'm fluent in Portuguese, and like when I first was designing games at the turn of the century, or the turn of millennia, I was living in Brazil and I had no internet, I had nothing, and like I had roommates, and it was like, what do we do for entertainment? I said, I bet I could make games. So we'd have coins that we'd use for randomizers. If you've ever played the game Flip Tales, which is an RPG, very similar mechanic, and then like I would write and tell interactive stories that were kind of like role-playing games. So there's a lot of Portuguese that finds its way into the game.
Yeah.
And really the thrust of it, though, it's like, well, what's the core? So there's these ideas. You're a game designer, there's lots of game designers. Where do you come in uniquely? And a friend of mine named Dan Felder, who's works at Electronic Arts as a designer, he said, you know, there's this idea of grim dark fantasy. He goes, your setting's grim bright. He said, there's this interesting through line of hope and optimism, and I'd be curious to know where that comes from, because you have this like post-apocalyptic thing, and it's kind of a scary, frightening world with these fell beyonders, and you have these adorable little Muppets with mechanics where they love each other and they're friends, and that, where does this all come from? And I had to think really hard about it. The year I became an adult, 9/11 happened, and like the whole world changed. I'd seen tragedy. My entire adult life, the nation of which I am a citizen, has been at war. I experienced homelessness during the Great Recession, where I had no home. I have, you know, debilitating chronic disease, you know, ankylosing spondylitis, where my joints are fusing. But I still believe in my heart of hearts that the world is generally good, that people can get along, and there is sort of this natural beauty to all relationships and all things, even hard things. And that doesn't mean there aren't bad actors. It's why they are our villains in the game. Now, we might not exactly know their perspective, but there are villains in my game, and there are monsters, which are aberrations in the code, so to speak. That's the same way we might have natural disasters or things like that. I mean, it's just the laws of physics. But in my heart of hearts, you know, it's one of those things. There's this line from a Japanese video game that's like, you know, I believe in fairy tales and Lucky Charms. You know, I believe in promises. I believe in all that stuff. And most of all, I believe in you. So where GrymmWorld came, it's kind of like, I believe in you all as players to create a beautiful story. Like, that's why there's no real canon to this. I give a statement about authorship. I used to list myself on Twitter as the author of GrymmWorld. It's not true. That would be hypocritical. The players are authors. The game masters are authors. My editor was an author. We're all authors. Like, this is everybody's. And I often see that. And it's actually a pet peeve of mine, where it's like, I'm the author of this. And then they name like a hardcover D&D adventure. And I go, yeah, you had nothing to do with my play experience. You had nothing to do with our table. There were some ideas in a book. And I don't say that to be mean or pejorative, but like, you were a designer and you contributed to it and you had great stuff. But when we think about authorship and the work itself and that play experience, I think you shared that with us. Like, I think we authored things too, as players. Like, our play created a story or things. And that's not, you know, I mean, no disrespect. I get a little heated there, but I was just like, Yeah, like I really want to give this to people. Like it's theirs. And once they have it, it's like make this your own, like establish your own mythology at the table. And
Yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah, I think I'm very much with you on this. I mean, I feel I'm not sure if we have an exact agreement on authorship and all of that. I tend to think that no. So
Yeah.
here's my idea. I think that here's what I know from being a teacher is that I feel like the experiences created at the game table have every bit as much reality and strength as any experience that's just say set down on paper. And if anything, the experience at the table between the players is the real thing that happened. This is just, the book or the hardcover might just be a place where something started, where maybe a small spark came about, but the real
I'll make a
sparks.
differentiation if I can, because you've said something so about experiences. So, and this is where I'll go back and say, yes, they are the author, and I'll give them their authorship. They're the author of the written story experience in that the act of hearing something from someone else. In other words, we have sensory experiences, we experience
Mhm.
the world. Story experiences, either someone writes a book or makes a movie or something, and you have that story experience. Then there's play experience. So we're
Mm.
authoring the play experience. So I apologize to everyone who I yelled at who's written a D&D hardcover adventure. You're the authors. Serious heart hands. You know I get intense.
If you're upset right now, you should
I,
rage subscribe to my channel.
you should.
Please rage
And please leave
subscribe.
in the comments, because it's the
I
trendy thing to do. Be
just
like,
leave lots of comments.
get these guys.
Share this everywhere, and talk about how angry you are about this show, and then make those people rage subscribe too. It'd be great. I mean, it'd be terrible. It'd be great or something like that. But at any rate, yeah, I kind of I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And but I do think there's a lot of value in what you say. People devalue that experience among the players where they create this thing like an ice sculpture or like a paper craft town at one of your games that is fleeting and yet beautiful for those moments, and then every bit is real.
Not to
As
plug another channel, so I won't name it, but
No,
they
you should
had a
go
really
ahead.
good video where they said uh, the book is not the game, the recipe is not the meal, right? And so it's like this is the game, and they had a bunch of clips of people playing D&D. They're like, the book is still very important, but the game is the game.
What's
So
the? I am not a jealous guy, and I'm totally
that's Matt
fine. What's?
Colville's channel.
Oh,
It's an older video.
he doesn't need a plugging.
No, he doesn't.
I'm sure his subscriptions are going to shoot through the roof now.
Glad I could help in some small way.
I know, right? Matt, if you want to come on, I'm willing to help you out with your little channel. I'm sure that I could really give you some advice and
Heard you had
experience.
a Kickstarter. Maybe
Why
we can
don't
help
we?
push it along.
Yeah, let's push it along. I don't know if he's got any time or anything. I don't know, but we like to. He's my YouTube neighbor, so I like to help people out sometimes. So I've totally lost track of where I am. Let me click on my interview questions and get back to
Sure.
that. Um, how? Tell me a little bit about, because I was very interested in this idea, but tell me about the Narrarador in GrymmWorld, and the
Yeah, I
impact.
spoke.
I'd love to hear about where this idea came from, and please.
So the reference of the Narrador, it was inspired by uh, playable storyteller characters from games such as Ryutama, which is a Japanese pastoral traveling game. It's kind of been nicknamed Miyazaki's Oregon Trail. And there's this idea that the way you flavor the campaigns is by choosing these different ryujin, which are different colored dragons, and you will know the theme of the game based on by which dragon's in it. So, and they have their own mechanics that engage with the game itself. I had four very good friends in gaming who were sort of the springboard inspirations for different types of stories of intrigue, stories of romance, stories of a war. Um, uh, so we have these different narrators which will flavor and impact the world in dynamic and unique ways. It might be seasonal, it might be the type of animals you see in the game, it might be the theme for the campaign. So it's a great way to let people know what they're going to play. And when I played a really fun one shot of GrymmWorld for a paying audience. They had hired me to come out and run it, and we had a tree stump druid. Like, they literally were a tree stump, and they were a druid, and they were just a pyromancer, just fire magic, and it was really neat. But as soon as the Narrarador showed up and they had read the book, they're like, they kind of freaked out. They're like, this is going to be a really scary session because I know who she is, and she could very well kill us in this encounter, I think, although that's not the intention. You don't want to kill them, but it created the right tone. If the players are familiar, they're like, yep, we're gonna have to do some investigation tonight. We're gonna have to be on our toes. Let's see how we can sneak around. Or I also show them that the Narrarador could switch mid-session, and they heard the howling of wolves, and they're like, wolves? They're like, but we don't see any wolves. There's no wolf prints, but we hear wolves. They're like, battle's coming up. Not only that, it's going to be a big one, because the sign of the wolf and dragons related to that particular Narrarador. But simple little components, and I think about how you can impact games mechanically, and impact the game mechanically based on player choice. For example, if the players are seeing a big threat and they charge the threat, maybe you give them a bonus on their attack for being so brave. Or maybe they run away. Well, let's give them something to run away from. The monsters do double damage now. You better run. You made the decision to run. Well, I want to give you a reason to run. I often design mechanics that accelerate play, so more faster, get to the next beat, as opposed to stall play. It's not like I'm going to penalize your attack rolls if you're running away. No, like, that'll just slow. They turn around and fight. Be longer, more drawn out. Let's just make it so it's higher stakes. The Narrarador, that's sort of where it came from, where I love these old Jim Henson storyteller things, or even the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. The Dungeon Master will show up.
That's right.
Like, I love or even Disney's Robin Hood. Alan Dale the Rooster shows up, and he's kind of part of the story. Sometimes he interacts, sometimes he doesn't. I just love the idea of a character that the game master can interject to sort of, hi, it's me.
Well, what I like about it is that, in a way, I feel like game mastering is such, like, I feel it's a tough, maybe this is the understatement of the year, but I mean, it just feels like it's a really tough thing to sort of get and to start with and to sort of get going with, even though I try to, tell everyone, my students in particular, like, just go out there and do it and give it a try, and don't be frightened by it. But I feel like it's very much considered to be a bit of a soft skill, when in a way I feel like it's more like an interpersonal kind of skill, like maybe presenting for an audience, or perhaps giving a very compelling speech, or standing up in front of a group of people and maybe directing them to go, okay, everyone, we're heading this way. And it's more about those so-called soft skills that are actually, if you broke them down, you could find some parts to them that you can use. And I feel like the Narrador, in a way, is, I don't want to say this in a way that makes it sound like it's bad, but I mean, I feel that, like, it's almost a set of training wheels to help people sort of steer, like, flavor, and steer, like, a session, and know when to sort of, they can interject and when they can say
dials
things.
You can turn,
It's
like,
and to that, sort of with this in mind, this kind of blends into another great thing about the Narrator section, which you include details on story arcs, which I was really, the English teacher in me was like, ho ho ho, finally, there's like, here's like, it seems so obvious to me, like, the idea of talking about story arcs, explaining them to, like, burgeoning game masters, and helping them out with this. What gave you the idea to include story arcs, and tell us why you think they're important, maybe for GrymmWorld and maybe for games in general?
I think we talked about how my goal is to persist until the loop stops, and I think story arcs are a good way to add some parameters to those loops, and to reboot or start again. And I think definitely one of the ideas to do that is, especially with it being fairy tale themed, it gives you the opportunity to switch up how you want to use the Narrador, or if you want to focus on different aspects of the setting itself. I'm very proud of all the different areas we created. And so those essentially focusing on the arc, it helps people get that feeling. It's like I gave the advice: starting, completing, starting, completing. It gives people an opportunity to complete. Many Dungeons and Dragons campaigns fizzle out over time, and so they if you can at least complete an arc, it gives you a good uh, 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 point of sunset.
Yeah, and I think that what also helps about that is I think it helps the experience have it gives the experience power. And it's sort of like one thing that I've noticed about following an arc in like a game or whatnot, because your mind kind of knows where to slot the beginning, middle, and the end, and it kind of sees the circle the loop that you're talking about. And when you have this kind of complete loop, and it kind of ties into what you're saying about completing things. When you have something complete, I feel like personally, I feel very satisfied with it, and I often want to complete something else or return to something like that. And I feel like the idea of the story arc helps the GM to sort of define those areas, combined with the idea of the narrator, like to sort of define those loops and define those arcs, just as you're saying. So it honestly, that's kind of like what I meant when, and I don't know if it's fair to call it the GM section or not, but to me it just felt like a very relevant section that really had a lot of great things to say about the
Yeah,
idea of running something.
I would say I would call it the GM exclusive section, because I think all the parts of the book are useful for the game master, and I know what you mean by that.
Yes.
But it's kind of like there's a reason why the Dungeons Master's Guide doesn't really have a lot of rules. Like, it's mostly advice. So, or me, while I tried to not give too much advice, it's kind of like, here's what we're thinking.
Mm.
If I have notes on the side, it's like, here are all my notes on the side, and you can know exactly what we're going for.
Can you tell me? So we're kind of running out of time here, and you've been very kind with your time tonight. But is there some sort of work or accomplishment that you're particularly proud of? It doesn't necessarily have to be, say, something, role playing related, but is there anything that you're really excited about that you've accomplished, you've done, or you're even in the mid?
Yes. Um, 1 year ago, I offered free mentorship to anyone who wanted it. Um, Anyone could contact me, and we could do an intake session. And this is a concept known as peer mentoring. I'll explain what that is. It doesn't necessarily mean you are peers because you're in the exact same station of life. It means I'm going to mentor you, you're going to mentor me. And I did it through a sophisticated methodology that's used some of the highest levels of business. This is good stuff. I put together a lot of materials on providing this. And the reason I did it is because I wanted to test the methodology behind the people that taught it to me, because I was like, that's pretty good. It seemed to work for me, but does this work for other people? So I just started offering free mentoring. I offered sessions to over 20 people. And, today, I was looking at one of the people who I had worked with, and just to see her flourishing in the space, and she's written and designed games, she's performing an AP, she's had trips, photo with like a bunch of people where, your head turns, you're like, I know exactly who that is. But just seeing someone flourish. And so, like, if I ever have a legacy, it's anyone who I work with in those mentoring sessions, anytime I see them actively living their purpose. Not only that, taking their purpose and like identifying more or less a calling, the great thing they're going to do, and they're just doing that great thing. That's, and it's their accomplishment, but being able to get them started, almost like Gandalf, I just gave you a nudge out the door. Like, having those critical conversations that change people's lives is the greatest thing that I've ever been able to give to other people. Because a lot of people just don't know where to start, or they get nervous, or they have doubts. I'm like, look, I'm a half blind, disabled trans girl in Northern Virginia who, I mean, I I'm doing pretty well though, and it's because other people helped me. So what I want to do is I want to give back. So that's really, my purpose, and the thing I'm most proud of is creating and giving opportunities for people to find their own expression in risk-free and in a safe way. Or if there's risks, um, we're not afraid of the risks. If we
Mm.
are, we work through that fear to do great things.
Well, Daisy, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I think it's just from talking to you, I can really see how much agency you give to those around you. I can really see the idea of you enabling your players to enjoy themselves, enabling GMs to enjoy themselves, enabling the people around you to really enjoy themselves. I appreciate the fact that you've spent some time tonight with me. Thank you so much for that. Just to let everybody out there know, I ask people on the program who are very interesting to me, who I've watched and followed, who I feel like talking to, and people I think that have some great things to say. If you are interested in improving as a game master or improving as a player, if you're interested in a great game, I'm not being compensated for this. I call people on the program that I'm really interested in, I really believe in. Please do check out the links below to Daisy's work. There is far more. There is a just a depth of knowledge and insights. There is a real depth to her playing style, to her games that I could never cover in an hour and a half. I had so many more questions, and I know I can't get to them all. I don't want to spend all night, all of our time doing this, but please do check out those links. Um, and so finally, Daisy, thank you so much for spending time here with us tonight. I very much appreciate it. And I hope maybe at some point to see you again on the program. And for all of you out there who are watching, if you like what you saw and if you want me to talk to more people like Daisy in the future, please do like and subscribe. It's great. And maybe even a share would help out a little bit too. But for all of you out there, have a great next gaming session and please stay safe. And I will see you in a few weeks with another one of the thousand faces of role players that I that I like to talk to from time to time. All right, everybody. Thank you so much and have a very good night.